Welcome to the Ancient Cookware channel, where on every episode, we show you different aspects of our products, such as how they are made, how to use, cure, and use our products, how to properly care for them, and even recipes which you can use to get the most out of our products. In this episode, we show you how the Mexican cazuela is made. If you want to see how our cazuelas are made, you will have to drive deep into Mexico until you reach the semi-desert region in the Mexican state of Hidalgo, where you will eventually get to the clay mines of Hidalgo. There, our artisans extract the clay they use to make the cazuelas. Their trained eye helps them distinguish clay from regular dirt. The clay chunks are taken to the artisan's workshop, where they are spread out in the sun to dry thoroughly. Once dry and brittle, the clay chunks are ground to a fine powder with the help of an electric grinder, a modern-day addition, and with the help of a screen sieve. The powder is sieved several times to ensure a uniform fine powder and to eliminate any possible rocks or pebbles. Here, the fine clay powder is ready to be mixed to make the clay. To do so, the artisan starts mixing the powder with water and begins to knead the mixture. Of course, for larger baths, they do this on the floor of their workshop. They have to be careful it is not too hot or windy, and that's why this process is normally done early in the morning. The artisan continually adds water or clay powder until the correct consistency is achieved, until finally the desired consistency is achieved. The clay is left to rest at least 24 hours. Here you can see that the rested clay is more pliable, compared to this fresh one, which is not. To begin the process, the artisan takes a piece of the rested clay and begins by re-kneading it to get it loose for the molding process, continually pounding it on the workbench to get the clay ready. Once it reaches the desired consistency, he breaks off a piece of appropriate size for the ultimate piece he will work on, making it into a flat cylinder shape. The artisan then takes a piece of dried clay and begins to grind it into his workbench with a tool much like a meat pounder, but made for lava rock. It is actually the same material as lava stone molcajete. This grinding provides a powder which he uses to prevent the clay from sticking to the table or the mold he will use. Much the same way a baker uses flour to prevent dough from sticking to the work surfaces or mold. This little rock, as you can see, belonged to my great-grandparent. Very old. It's even missing a piece. I don't throw it away, not only because it's a memory of my ancestors, but also it is very practical. So how old is this tool? Let's say 125 to 130. Very practical. This one, a more modern one, just doesn't work the same. To continue the piece, the artisan begins to flatten the piece of clay. The artisans have different molds they can use depending on the intended piece. Each one is also made of clay and made by the artisans themselves. The center handles allows them to turn the mold during the molding process. The flattened piece of clay is draped over the mold and slowly pressed into the mold. With the excess trimmed with the help of a wire tool. He then takes an extra piece of clay, covers it in the previously ground clay powder, and uses it to press the clay more onto the mold to smooth the surface. The edges are smooth with a wet strip of leather. Depending on the shape of the piece, the artisan can flare out the side of the piece by rotating the mold while applying outward pressure with the wet leather strip. Eventually, the piece is turned over and removed from the mold.
Aquí es donde hay que darle bien la formita y sacamos el moldecito así. Ahí tenemos una.
Of course, an essential part is stamping the bottom with our logo. Once the piece has sufficiently dried, the artisan begins the laborious task of polishing the clay. He continuously rubs the clay with various pieces of rock and wet and dry sponges. The timing of the process is crucial. If they do it too soon after removing it from the mold, the piece can lose its shape. However, if they wait too long, the clay will harden too much to let itself be polished. To do the handles, the artisan begins by rolling a piece of clay forming a rod-shaped piece. The rod is then slowly flattened, and dipping the rod in water to make it slippery, he rubs his thumbs downward along the flattened rod to shape the handle, giving it the desired contour and ridges. Once attached, he smooths the joint where the two clay pieces met, making the joint invisible. Once fully dry, the pieces are fired in a dome-shaped wood-burning oven for over 3 hours. The pieces are stacked one on top of another in the upper chamber of the oven, while a hardwood fire is lit in the bottom chamber. As time passes, more wood is added to intensify the heat, eventually reaching temperatures of over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Once fired, the pieces are ready for glazing. The glazes we use are 100% certified lead-free and need to be mixed with water in proportions which are a proprietary secret. They have to be arduously mixed by hand slowly so as not to introduce bubbles, and for a long time to ensure proper dissolution. To glaze the pieces, the artisan carefully dips the entire pieces into the glaze, letting the excess drip away. For larger pieces, the glaze is splashed on and let to drip off. The glaze immediately begins to dry and become opaque. Once semi-dry, the bottom is scraped with a hard plastic tool to remove the glaze from the bottom, which can cause the piece to stick to the kiln in the second firing. The bottom is then cleaned with a wet sponge. The pieces are also decorated with the artisan's personal style with these handmade brushes. Once the glaze is fully dry, the piece is then ready for the final step of the process, which is the second firing. The second firing is done in a modern gas kiln to better control the temperature and the conditions. If during the second firing the temperature is too low, the glaze will not mature or become transparent, and if it's too high, it will become too melted and actually run off the piece. The pieces are then fired at between 950 to 1000 degrees Fahrenheit. So how long does it take to make the piece from start to finish?
Se lleva aproximadamente, vamos a hablar de unos entre de 15 a 20 días.
Total approximately 15 to 20 days.